Hey everyone, Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining us on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we're going to be working on our 2002 Volkswagen Golf GTI Mark IV. Today we're going to be covering how to replace the front brakes on your Mark IV. We are using our Zimmermann and TRW kit, which you can find on the site. That's going to come with some Zimmermann rotors, your TRW ceramic pads with a built-in wear sensor, a couple fresh clips, and some brake paste. Additionally, you're going to want to get some new rotor set screws, especially if yours are old and corroded. Typically, brakes are going to last you anywhere between 30 to 60,000 miles, depending on your driving habits. This car's been sitting for about 5 or 6 years. Now, where the brakes and pads aren't so old, they are very worn down just from age and being weathered, so we're going to be replacing those today. Couple of things you can look at before you do your brakes is, A, you can visually do an inspection, see how much meat is left on the pads. You can also measure them with special tools. Another thing you want to look for is the rotors themselves. Over time, will develop a lip as they wear. You can simply run your finger across the front of the face of the rotor, and if it catches on the ends, then more than likely the rotors are pretty worn. And then more worst case scenario situations, you get some grinding, you get some pulsation in the brake pedal from the warped rotor. So those are just a couple of things you can look at to see what kind of shape your brakes are in. Now, before we get started on this DIY, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this job. For this job, we have a couple of basic tools we're going to need, starting with a couple different size torque wrenches so we can torque down our hardware. I'm also using a 1/2-inch drive and a 3/8 drive ratchet. I have two different sized 18mm sockets, as well as a 17mm socket for our lug bolts. A couple different extensions if you need them. We're using a small 3/8 one today. You're going to need a 7mm hex socket, and then in addition we're going to be using a flathead screwdriver just to pry a couple things off. We have a little wire brush if you have rusty hubs, or if you live in New England like we do, then you're going to need that. We have a caliper hanging tool, and then we're going to be using a CTA piston retractor tool as well. If you don't have one of these, you can use something like one of these quick grips in addition to that. And then some nice to haves for this job are going to be an impact gun so we can get our wheels off easily, and an electric ratchet just to speed up the removal of our hardware. Now that we have our tools covered, let's get started on this DIY. Now that we're at the vehicle, we're going to start by removing our wheel. First, we're going to take off our center cap. These 337s had this nice spin-on center caps. From there, we have 5 17mm lug bolts. So I'm going to take my 17 on the impact and get these off. With our wheel off, the first thing we're going to do is work on removing this anti-rattle clip. To get our anti-rattle clip off, I'm just going to use a flathead screwdriver. You want to be mindful of the paint. Usually these GTI calipers are painted red. As you can see, the ones on these cars are a little bit worse for wear, so we're not going to be too worried about nickering them up. But if you have nicer calipers, you want to be mindful where you pry from and where you put your screwdriver. Just going to give it a couple wobbles, loosen this up. Our new brakes come with a new clip, so don't worry about mangling your old one. Unless you're not replacing it, then be a little bit more gentle with it. Beautiful. Now with that off, we can proceed to the rear of the caliper and work on removing the caliper from our carrier. Now at the back of the caliper, we're going to start by removing our 2 dust boot covers off so we can access our guide pins. With those off, you're going to need a 7mm hex to get the guide pins off. I'm going to use a ratchet to break them free. These shouldn't be that tight. They're only supposed to be torqued to about 21 foot-pounds, so these were not that bad. And then with those loose, I'm going to swap to an electric ratchet just to speed things up. And I'm going to get myself a caliper hanger, just set that up there to be ready. Set those to the side. Just careful, the outer pad's going to want to fall out. You'll notice on the passenger side we have no sensor. That's because the sensor is located on the driver's side, so that's the only thing that's going to change from side to side. I'm going to hang on to that old pad in there for now. I'll show you why in a little bit, but for now let's just hang this off to the side. All right. With that off, our next step is going to be to remove our caliper carrier bracket. I'm use an 18mm socket on a big breaker bar. These are usually going to be a little bit tighter on there. These are torqued to about 92 foot-pounds. Some people just snug them up nice and good. On this car, you'll see in a moment, someone stripped out the rotor set screw hole, so our rotor is loose. Just be mindful as you take this bracket off. This can fall on you, so get a hand on there, get a second set of hands if you need it. Just going to put an electric ratchet on it to get them the rest of the way off. And now I'm going to hold my rotor with my left hand and get the rest of this carrier bracket off with the other. Beautiful. Set that to the side. And then normally you would have a rotor set screw right here that you would have to remove. This one's been stripped off, so we're just going to pull our rotor off. Now, because we live in New England, as you can see, things are pretty crusty. I like to always clean the hubs when I can and put a little bit of anti-seize on them, so I'm going to do that really quickly with this wire brush. You can use a wire brush on a drill. We're not going to go too crazy on this, just a little bit of attention. That's all it needs. Now I'm just going to use a little bit of Liqui Moly ceramic paste. That way the new rotor doesn't seize itself to the hub. Now normally at this point you would want to go ahead and put your rotor back on, put your set screw back in, and then continue reassembling. But because we can't put our rotor on and hold everything in place, I'm going to hold off for now and I'm going to prep our caliper to receive our new pads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our CTA tool. This is a CTA 1465, sorry, if you're looking for one of these. You can find that on the site. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our caliper off the hook so you guys can get a better look at this. And then the reason I kept the old pad in here is because we're going to use it to our advantage. We're going to set our tool up like this. And then we're going to push on the pad itself. That way we lessen the chance of damaging the piston or any components on the caliper itself. This old pad's going to go in the trash, so we're not really worried about it. As you can see, these are not that worn. There's not going to be much travel left to this piston, but it can't hurt to maximize our room for working. Another thing you want to know is keep an eye on your brake fluid level. You don't want to overpressurize the system. If you have to, undo the cap and siphon some out. Beautiful. We've got a couple millimeters out there. That should give us a lot of room to install the new pads and rotors. Now we can ditch this old pad, inspect our seal. Other than a little bit of corrosion rust, everything looks pretty good over here. I'm going to clean this up and then let's continue wrapping this side up. So now we can go ahead and mount our rotor onto our hub. And while I hold the rotor with one hand, I'm going to head back to the back of the hub and get our caliper carrier bracket back on. So just to help myself out, I've just threaded a lug bolt back in. It's not going to hold it perfectly, but at least the rotor won't fall on me while we continue filming. So again, you're going to take your 18mm bolt. I like to start with the top one. Just get it started by hand. Once the top one started, continue to do the bottom one. And then using our electric ratchet, I'm just going to snug them back up to the hub, and then we'll torque them down. With our 18mm snug up, we're going to go ahead and torque these down to 92 foot-pounds. From there, I'm going to take my new brake pad, put a little bit of grease on these inner tabs where they slide into the inside bore of the piston, a little bit on the ears. We'll get it on the caliper and continue from there. Again, if you're buying the TRW Zimmermann kit like we're using up front here, it's going to come with this Ate brake paste. Before I mount that into the caliper, I'm also going to prep my outboard pad at the same time, and that one can just sit on the carrier. And you're not making a Picasso, don't go crazy with the grease. As good as it is for keeping things moving, it also is really good for attracting dirt and grime. Your outboard pad can just slide onto your carrier like so, and forget about it. Now we can unhook our caliper. And take our new pad. And you want to make sure that all three tabs go on the inside of the piston. Beautiful. Now from there we can slide it back onto our hub. If you're reusing your guide pins, you want to clean them up a little bit before reinstalling them. So I'm going to do that really quick. This next step right here is completely dealer's choice. If you go online, you'll see it's like the cilantro thing. 50% of the people love it, 50% of the people hate it. All right. With those in, you can press them in, and you almost kind of hear them click into the threaded portion on the carrier. They don't always click, but you can feel it. Once you're engaged, you can start them by hand. Beautiful. And now we're going to torque them down to 21 foot-pounds. And then don't forget to put your two dust caps back on if your vehicle still has them. Boom. And then now, the anti-rattle clip. To get the anti-rattle clip on, I like to start with the top, keying it into the caliper first, making sure that the ear is over the carrier bracket on this side. With the bottom part of the clip in the caliper, I'm going to take my flathead screwdriver and just use it to simply guide over the rest of this ear, just like that. Beautiful. Now we can get this lug bolt out and get our wheel back on and wrap up this passenger side. Beautiful. Let's get this on the ground and then we'll torque these down to 88 foot-pounds. Again, this is 88 foot-pounds. Button it up by putting our center cap back on. And there you have it, my good people, another DIY in the books. You're going to want to repeat the same steps on the driver's side of the vehicle. Just note the only thing that changes is that you have a built-in wear sensor on the pad. Pretty straightforward, it's just a clip. If you like what you saw in this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments on what we did today, leave those in the comment box below. And if you like this DIY and you want to see more like them, please consider subscribing. We make new ones all the time. As always, thank you for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.